Good morning. Welcome to Rising. I'm Robby Soave, and I have the very special pleasure of being joined at the desk this morning by Amber Duke. You're not Brianna Joy Gray or a leftist at all. In fact, this imposter has infiltrated our show.
Infiltration, careful. You're making me sound like an illegal immigrant or something.
Oh, no. Well, so that's what we're going to learn, is that I'm the pretender and you're the real conservative of the two.
Yeah, so the audience is going to learn real quick.
Yeah, they're going to have to brace themselves for that. All right. Brianna will be back later this week. She has the day off. Thank you so much for filling in. And why don't you get us started?
Let's do it. Chaos erupted when President Biden's motorcade was struck by an SUV in Wilmington, Delaware last night. Here's the moment caught on camera.
Mr. President, why are you losing to Trump in the polls?
The president and the first lady were unharmed and returned to their homes safely. The event appears to be an accident, as the driver has since been charged with a DUI.
And in case you missed it, Biden, at the beginning of that clip we just played, told reporters that polls showing him faltering against 2024 competitors were, quote, wrong. However, Decision Desk headquarters polling averages show that Biden is squarely trailing former President Donald Trump and also South Carolina Republican Nikki Haley in head-to-head matches. Biden does best when against Ron DeSantis by just a few points. Now, the president is currently battling his base over Ukraine, also the Israel war, spending for both of those efforts. And according to analysis in The Hill, the president's blanket support for funding weapons and aid shipments overseas may come back to bite him with the party's progressive base in 2024. So the reaction I had to that clip of Biden, hearing the car accident. And this could be totally wrong, and yell at me in the comments if you know more about these kind of protocols than I do, but they moved him too slowly for my taste. It was just a little too slowly. Didn't you feel like there wasn't quite enough hustle, given that there was a crash or explosion? Maybe it sounded exactly like a crash very nearby. And they get him in that car. He's elderly. You got to be careful. Getting elderly people into cars is something we had an experience doing with our own grandparents and such. So maybe that they worried about bumping his head more than whatever the danger was. But I thought it was a little slow. It
was a little slow for my taste too. I will say, even if you are in this moment of confusion, you don't know exactly what's going on, you don't know whether to put him in the car or take him back inside, there should have been some shielding going on, right?
Yeah.
Like, they should have collapsed around him and made some kind of bubble to protect him. I was a little weird to me. I also have to think about how wasted this guy must have been to drive right into a presidential motorcade. I mean, if you've never seen one in person, they are unbelievably long. A lot of the cars have their lights on, especially as the president is actually getting into the beast. It's impossible to miss. And in addition to that, they usually block the nearby roadways with motorcycles, police motorcycles with their lights on. So he had to have driven through like multiple red flags in order to get to that back car in the motorcade.
Which is not good. I'm glad, no one was injured. I don't think he was seriously hurt, or the driver. But it's the holidays. People should be careful. Don't drink and drive, people. You won't. You are unlikely to ram into the presidential motorcade of all the things that can happen to you, but it's not a good idea. So please don't do that. When I first saw this video footage like crossed my social media feed before I checked out where it was. I just assumed it was the streets of DC because every time anything bad involving like a car or just some incident on the streets, I just assume it's in DC because we have like, I don't know if you were looking at the most latest crime statistics for our beloved city. Carjackings up, just insane. Murders are up so high compared to other cities. Crime is falling in a lot of cities post-COVID, which is a good thing. In our nation's capital, it's remained very sticky. We're not close to, like, we're not all the way back to the heyday in like the early 90s,
right.
But it's totally going the wrong direction. But no, this was not in D.C. This was in Wilmington, Delaware, and yeah, I don't know. It's funny. Obviously, Biden keeps saying that the polls are wrong or you're looking at the wrong polls, but sorry, Joe, we all know that the polls have now consistently shown him behind the likely Republican candidate, Donald Trump, the unlikely but I guess conceivable under some weird set of circumstances backup candidate, Nikki Haley, Biden behind in swing state after swing state, which is what really matters, like way behind. So I don't know what kind of polls he's reading. Maybe someone can ask Karine Jean-Pierre about that.
Right. No, it's really bizarre. I mean, typically when we look at poll bias in just the political industry, in terms of all of these different firms, they're usually biased in favor of Democrats, especially the ones that have consistently shown Biden down by 5-6 points against Trump. And then, as you said, even worse in swing states. The Des Moines Register poll that came out recently on the Republican primary was fascinating because it showed Trump actually leading that field in independents, which could potentially translate to a general. I find that incredibly fascinating. But even with the polls that have come out from the New York Times, the NBC News Harris X poll, consistently have the same story about Biden against Trump. And so I don't know how you explain that away and claim that suddenly the polls that all predicted Trump losing in 2016 are now biased against Joe Biden. I mean, the reality, too, is that Democrats are, oversampled in all of these polls, and they weight the polls to try to account for that. But Republicans still don't even respond to polls as often as Democrats, and they also don't often give truthful answers because they're skeptical of pollsters. And like anyone who's knocked doors will tell you that they go to talk to Republican voters, and if they acknowledge that they received a call from a pollster, they'll be like, yeah, but I didn't tell them that I was voting for Trump. Because they just like don't trust them. I mean, it's
like, the deep state wants my address again. Go away.
Especially over the phone, they do not like when pollsters call them.
The only thing I'll say is that it seems to be the case that in both 2022 and then again this year, the Democratic Party overperformed some of the fundamentals in a way that definitely surprised me in 2022. Maybe not this year. Something that wasn't quite. I mean, I don't know that it was a polling underestimation of Joe Biden's party, but at the end of the day, I expected the Republicans to take back the Senate in 2022, given how bad the economic situation was and how much contempt there seemed to be for Biden. The Republican candidates couldn't close it in Nevada, Arizona, and Georgia and Pennsylvania. So does something like that repeat itself? Yeah,
I think about that too. 2022 was an interesting case though, because everyone kind of underestimated the abortion question. And also Republicans did not really invest the way that they should have. They really tried to rest on their laurels heading into 2022. The RNC, for example, didn't really get involved in most of the races until the final 2 to 3 weeks because they didn't have much money. And they tried to come up with this like weird delinquent voter scheme where they said, okay, if someone voted 3 weeks early in 2020, and they haven't voted at that time period in 2022, we're going to spend all this money to reach out to them because they're called a delinquent voter. They haven't voted on their normal timeline. Well, obviously, people's behavior changed significantly since the end of the pandemic. Sure. And so instead of spending money on voter turnout of your base and also trying to convince independents and swing voters, they decided to go after people who were probably already going to vote anyway or 90% going to vote anyway, but just hadn't by the time of Election Day. And it's because that was like the last minute scheme that they had to throw together with the little money that they had left. And so I just think that 2022 was a case of poor Republican management and over expectations over some like weird political thing we didn't see coming.
Well, Biden does have that in his corner, that he is up against the Republican Party and, their tactics, their ability to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory.
Exactly.
More Rising right after this.